Elias Ward boarded Flight 327 with the kind of quiet presence that made people forget him the moment he passed. He liked it that way. Anonymity had become his only form of peace. He wore a faded gray jacket, carried no luggage besides a small backpack, and kept his head lowered as he made his way to seat 4-A, the window seat he always chose on long flights. Windows made him feel less trapped, even though the sky was the one place he had sworn he'd never return to. As the plane taxied down the runway, Elias observed everything with subtle, practiced glances. He counted the exits, registered the tail number of the aircraft, noted the flight crew's tendencies. Nervous, overworked, but kind to the average traveler, he was a software consultant who preferred quiet. To himself, he was no one, and that was fine. Being no one meant no one was hunting him, or so he believed. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin settled into the usual rhythms of boredom and fatigue. A toddler kicked the back of Elias' seat in a steady beat. A college girl typed furiously on her laptop, and a man across the aisle snored with frightening confidence. The flight attendants moved like ghosts between the rows, offering drinks with smiles that barely concealed exhaustion. Elias leaned his head against the window, more out of habit than comfort. The clouds below drifted in lazy formations, turning the world into a white sea. His thoughts were drifting too, slow, heavy, but calm. Maybe he could sleep. Then he saw it. A shadow, sharp, angular, cut across the soft cloud tops below them. For a split second, Elias convinced himself it was an illusion, a trick of light, a passing cloud formation, anything but what he feared. But then the second shadow appeared, and the third. Elias sat up straighter, breath catching in his throat. No, not here. Not now. He pressed his forehead to the window, eyes narrowing as he searched the horizon. There, just barely visible in the sun's glare, were metallic wings, sleek, fast military F-35s. They flew in a staggered formation, keeping a dangerous proximity to the commercial jet. Elias' heart pounded once, then dropped into a cold, controlled beat. He'd seen this maneuver before. It wasn't escort behavior, it was interception. The captain's voice crackled overhead, far too calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing minor communication issues. Please remain seated." Communication issues. Right. The plane shuddered as one of the fighters adjusted position. A few passengers gasped. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was turbulence. Elias knew better. He'd been in those jets. He'd flown those formations. He knew exactly what orders they were following. He closed his eyes, whispering a truth he hadn't spoken since the day he died. "They found me. Because once you've been erased by the people who created you, there's only one reason they'd want you found again." Long before Elias became the quiet man in seat 42A, he had been someone else. Someone the world once celebrated, feared, and ultimately erased. His call sign had been uglysix, part of a classified aerospace program that never existed on paper. The public saw test pilots as heroes, but in the real world, they were expendable assets buried beneath layers of secrecy. And in that darkness, betrayal grew like mold. It began 3 years earlier on a desert base. The sun baked until the sand shimmered like molten metal. Elias lived for the sky back then. He breathed engine smoke, adrenaline, and ambition. His whole world was built around the aircraft he tested, prototypes that pushed the boundaries of physics, and the people who worked beside him. Chief among them was Colonel Nathan Rhodes, the man Elias admired more than anyone. Rhodes had sharp steel gray eyes, a voice that could command a room with a whisper, and a career paved with medals for missions no one was allowed to name. He was the kind of leader young pilots wanted to become, and Elias did. He also loved Marin Hale, the brilliant aerospace engineer whose hands had shaped every line, every bolt, every dream that took flight from their hangar. She was warmth in a place built from steel and silence. Their stolen moments, late-night coffee, unspoken glances over blueprint tables, held promises neither dared to say aloud until the night he asked her to marry him. She said yes without hesitation. Elias remembered the way she laughed, soft and breathless, as if she finally had something bigger than the sky. He never imagined Rhodes would steal all of it. His career, his fiancée, his future. The betrayal unfolded like a slow, silent detonation. Strange things began happening on base. Elias' terminal showed files he had never opened. His access logs recorded entries he never made. Simulations he hadn't run appeared under his credentials. At first, he thought it was a glitch. Then it wasn't. Security stormed his quarters at dawn. They didn't give him time to speak, didn't offer explanations, just handcuffs and accusations. His squad, men who had once trusted him with their lives, looked at him like he was a stranger. Rhodes was there too, calm, disappointed, dangerous. "Elias," he'd said quietly, "you should have known better." Those words haunted him more than the charges. Treason, sabotage, selling classified schematics. He never stood trial. People who knew too much rarely did. Instead, they loaded him into a transport vehicle under the guise of relocation. He realized too late that he wasn't being moved. He was being erased. The explosion was meant to look like an accident. The wreckage was staged. The report claimed no survivors. The world mourned the heroic pilot Elias Ward. Marin mourned too. Except months later, Elias saw a photo on a news ticker, Marin wearing a ring he hadn't given her, standing beside Rhodes at a military gala. They looked perfect, and Elias understood everything. His death had been convenient, his absence necessary. He wasn't framed for what he had done, but for what Rhodes wanted. Everything Elias ever was. Everything Elias ever loved. And now, somewhere above the Atlantic, the past he'd spent years outrunning was catching up at Mach 1. The first warning came as a hollow metallic thump against the fuselage. Small enough that most passengers dismissed it as turbulence, but sharp enough to make Elias look up immediately. Through the cockpit door's tiny window, he saw the captain's silhouette stiffen. A second thump followed, louder, deliberate. The F-35s were signaling, and not politely. Or were being attacked. Someone whispered from behind him. Not yet, Elias thought. He moved down the aisle with controlled urgency. People watched him with confused eyes, some anxious, others irritated. But no one stopped him. They could feel something was wrong. An instinct older than language humming through the air. Even the baby who'd been crying earlier had gone silent. Elias reached the cockpit and knocked softly. The captain cracked the door open, and in that half-second glimpse Elias saw raw panic in the man's eyes. "You're the one from earlier," the captain said. "The flight attendant told me you recognized the jets." "I know what they're doing," Elias replied. The captain swallowed. "And what is that?" "Trying to force a diversion. For what purpose?" Elias hesitated. How could he explain that this was not a hostile country or extremist faction? That it was his own past. The one that should have ended in a burning wreck, coming to claim him. "You need to let me inside," he said instead. "What authority do you have?" Elias lifted his gaze, letting the truth show for the first time. Not in words, but in his eyes. The kind of gaze only a man who has flown too close to death can carry. A gaze soldiers recognize. The captain understood. He stepped aside. Inside the cockpit, alarms blinked like angry red stars. The co-pilot worked furiously at the controls, muttering, "They're jamming us. I can't get comms through. These codes, they're military. High clearance, I've never even." Then the radio crackled. Not the commercial band. Not the emergency frequency. The classified military channel. "Civilian aircraft, respond," a sharp voice commanded. "We know you are harboring uglysix. Comply and prepare for escort." The co-pilot blinked. "Ugly what? Is this some kind of joke? Who is uglysix?" Elias inhaled. The air inside the cockpit tasted like old memories, metal, ozone, and fear. Before he could speak, another voice erupted over the channel, colder, heavier with authority. "Elias Ward." The voice boomed. "This is Colonel Nathan Rhodes. I know you're listening." Elias' hands curled into fists. Rhodes continued, smooth as oil across water. "Be reasonable. You were supposed to stay dead. You had your chance to disappear quietly. Don't make this harder." The co-pilot's eyes darted between Elias and the radio, realization dawning. "You're uglysix," the captain whispered. The name hit Elias like a physical blow. Hearing it again, the call sign erased from every system. The identity wiped from every record. Felt like a ghost pulling him back into a nightmare. Outside, an F-35 moved dangerously close, wings tilting as if to push the airliner off course. Passengers screamed. The captain looked pale. "What do we do?" Elias reached for the unused auxiliary headset hanging beside the console. "We'll fight back," he said quietly, "but not with weapons." He placed the headset on, his heartbeat steadied. "This is uglysix," he said into the receiver, voice calm, cold, unbroken. "And I'm done running." The entire cockpit fell silent. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath. Because when a ghost answers its name, the world changes. The silence that followed Elias' declaration was so deep the cockpit instruments seemed to hum louder, almost unsettled, as if even the aircraft itself sensed what was coming. Outside, the F-35s fanned out, reshaping their formation into something predatory. They were preparing for the next step, forced compliance. Elias knew their playbook by heart. He had once flown with the same icy precision. Rhodes' voice slithered through the radio again. "Elias, uglysix, listen to me. You cannot win this. Surrender now, and we can negotiate your future." The laugh that escaped Elias held no warmth. "You mean you'll decide how I die this time?" A tense beat. "You died when you betrayed your country," Rhodes replied sharply. "This is just the paperwork." The captain bristled. "This man is a civilian passenger, whatever you have with him. It is classified," Rhodes snapped. "And none of your concern." Elias placed a firm hand on the captain's shoulder. "It's all right. They don't want the passengers. They want me." The co-pilot looked horror-stricken. "They'll kill everyone just to get you." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the next moment the F-35 on the left flank angled upward, lining itself to cross directly in front of the airliner's nose. A maneuver meant to force a sharp turn. Dangerous, reckless, effective. Unless the person watching knew exactly how to counter it. Captain, reduce thrust by 5% and keep a steady climb. Do not turn, Elias instructed. Why? Because they're expecting you to panic. Don't. The captain obeyed. The airliner steadied. The F-35 overshot slightly, thrown off by the unexpected calm. Good. Elias leaned toward the radioing mic. Rhodes, you never were as clever as you thought. Bold words for a dead man. Rhodes snarled. Elias' fingers danced across the secondary console, typing a sequence of numbers he never believed he'd use again. A backdoor code installed years ago for emergency field communication between the ugly squad. The code generated an encrypted distress signal, one that bypassed all official channels. A signal heard only by those who had flown under the same unspoken oath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, uglysix, this is ugly too, say again. Elias closed his eyes, relief tightening his chest. Rourke, he breathed. I need your help. Static crackled, followed by the gruff voice he remembered better than his own. You're alive. Hell. All right, son, we've got your six. The sky erupted with movement as more stealth fighters appeared on radar. Ugly 2-4-5 pilots who once trusted Elias with their lives and who had never fully believed the official report of his treason. Rhodes cursed. You traitors! Fall back! That is an order. But the sky had already chosen sides. Negative, Rourke said, voice steady as steel. We've been waiting 3 damn years for the truth. The new arrivals boxed Rhodes in, forcing his jet downward. His breathing became frantic over the radio. Elias, listen, we can fix this. No, Rhodes, Elias said softly. You can't fix what you broke. Rourke transmitted the encrypted files exposing Rhodes' betrayal. Proof of falsified evidence, manipulated logs, and even his secret relationship with Marin while Elias was still alive. The data spread like wildfire through command channels. Rod's world collapsed in real time. His jet wobbled as he tried to flee, but the ugly squad forced him into a slow descent toward a nearby airbase. Sirens blared in the background as military authorities prepared to detain him. Elias watched through the cockpit window, the tension melting into something bittersweet. Justice, not revenge, but sweet all the same. Uglysix, Rourke called. What now? Want a lift home? Elias smiled faintly. Home isn't a place for me anymore. You sure? Yeah, but thank you for believing in me. Always did. The radio went silent. As the airliner continued on its original path, the passengers remained blissfully unaware of the war that had taken place above their heads. The captain turned to Elias, eyes full of awe. You saved everyone on this plane. No, Elias said quietly. I just stopped running. When they landed, he slipped out before officials arrived, merging into the airport crowd like a shadow fading at dawn. Elias Ward had died once. Uglysix, however, lived again, not as a ghost but as a man finally free.